In all my time watching movies, Zuko and Kovu have remained two of my favorite characters. There's just something so relatable, you know? Like, you probably don't have a dope facial scar or anything, and godspeed if you do, but when Zuko says stuff like this,
I finally have you, but I can't get you home because of this blizzard. There's always something. Not that you would understand. You're like my sister. Everything always came easy to her.
yeah, I feel that in my soul. Or what about Kovu and that time the entire animal kingdom in the Pride Land sang that song as he ran away? That was a great moment too. The thing that ties these two characters together in my mind is that they're perfect examples of the Misfit trope, not fitting into any of the sides of a war they've found themselves in, and questioning their own morality and purpose. Today on Pangolo, I'll go through the important themes that I think ties the story of Zuko and Kovu. The story of identity, scars, nature, and the burdens of destiny. Identity is a funny thing, isn't it? I mean, think about it. You're born into a country or place you didn't choose, and you kinda have to accept the laws, ideals, and morals of that place. Laws, ideals, and morals that have been developed over probably decades, centuries, millennia even, and by people who you never met. How do you find yourself in this system if you did not fit in, if you don't conform? This is the struggle that is common to both Zuko and Kovu. With Zuko, he inherited the will of the Fire Nation, the will to conquer and find honor in conquering. He sees himself as incomplete and flawed, needing to conquer the Avatar to fulfill his destiny, to become himself. Most important is the influence of his father, Fire Lord and Phoenix Lord Ozai, on his perception of who he actually was. According to Zuko, his father felt he was lucky to be born and would only reward him with any show of solidarity when he appeared to have destroyed the Fire Nation's biggest enemy, the Avatar. And of course, in the episode where he and Aang both learn about the beginning of the 100-year war, we get to see that all the plans to end the Avatar and spread progress to the rest of the world were all Sozin's plans. Fire Lord Azulon inherited it, Fire Lord Ozai inherited it, Uncle Iroh inherited it, and Zuko inherited it. As a matter of fact, the entire Fire Nation had inherited it. And you can see this when Aang crashes into several Fire Nation classes filled with war propaganda and a strict zero-fun policy. A good example was the one time when Aang disrupted the class by suggesting, correctly by the way, that Fire Lord Sozin had unjustly attacked the Air Nation and that the Air Nation had no military. The shock on the kids' faces tells you everything you need to know about growing up a Fire Nation citizen. Just imagine what it's like growing up as a crown prince of the Fire Nation whom no one seems to like. Who are you then? Kovu also has an identity struggle, but through a different path than Zuko. In some sense, the special treatment he gets makes Kovu look more like Azula, the special child, while Nuka and Zuko are similar in being paid less love and respect. You see, Scar handpicked Kovu as the chosen one that would one day take over the Pride Lands, and this, unlike Zuko, made him get preferential treatment. However, his identity, like Zuko, was chosen for him before he even had the mind to decide right and wrong. Kovu's mother, Zira, also takes on the will of Scar and forces it on her son. He was modeled to be the one to return the Outlanders to becoming Pridelanders once again. As killing the Avatar was the mission given to Zuko, killing Simba was Kovu's. And just like the zero-fun policy that Zuko was raised in, Kovu also didn't know what fun was when he met Kiara and Pumbaa and Timon. The identity crisis that these two characters would encounter, I believe, is a result of their very own nature, their own perception of right and wrong. The nature versus nurture discourse may continue for the entirety of humanity's time in existence. Are people born good and bad? Or do they become good and bad because of external influences? Some people argue that's a bit of both. Maybe some people have a natural propensity for either evil or good, and exposure to one or the other will result in a great person or total evil. What I find interesting about Zuko and Kovu, however, is that they're kinda a cross between their story's hero and villain. With Kovu, his appearance alone is a dead giveaway. His build contrasts the slender one of Outlanders like Scar and fits more with the bulky Pridelanders like Simba and Mufasa. Granted, all the best Outlander meals and resources were spent training him. But there's also fur and mane color. It tilts more towards the darker shade of Scar, but it's not quite there. Scar's mane is black while Kovu has a brown mane, almost like a meeting in the middle between Scar and Simba. With Zuko, We find out that he's the descendant of both the Avatar and the Fire Lord who started the whole 100-Year War. But what makes Zuko become himself in the end? Because Azula is also descended from both hero and villain. You know, it's good symbolism, but it's still symbolism. And the show hints at the fact that Zuko has always been a good kid. In fact, his scar was a result of standing up against a general in the war room for a sinister plan to intentionally sacrifice Fire Nation troops to create a battle diversion. And another thing I find interesting is that Uncle Iroh was way more focused on saving Zuko than he was on saving Azula. In fact, he always distrusted her. Was this a commentary on Azula being more naturally bad than Zuko? Maybe. I mean, Azula always seemed to enjoy the pain of her brother. But it's quite clear from the beginning that Zuko wasn't really the genocidal maniac that he's expected to be as Fire Lord. And you could also say the same about Kovu. In the very short time we see Kovu as a child or cub, we can see that he doesn't have the Outlander versus Pridelander hatred. And even after he grows up with his training, and he seems to now be indoctrinated into that cycle of hatred, and all it takes is one trip to Apendi with the Rafiki and Kiara to return back to the factory setting, nice, good guy Kovu. Kovu and Zuko have a nature that conflicts with the identity they think is theirs. And what is the result? Ah, yes, destiny, Zuko's favorite word. Honor was probably his favorite word, but you get what I mean. Zuko was obsessed with what he thought he was meant to be. I almost feel like the reason he kept repeating it all the time was to reassure himself that he wasn't doing what he knew full well to be the wrong thing, to be against his nature. This destiny took him to the lowest depths, and one of the episodes that best displays this is Zuko Alone, one of my favorites in the entire franchise. For the first time in his life, Zuko is alone. No Fire Nation, no mother, no Uncle Iroh. Just an empty wilderness of rejection. Another period where Zuko feels the burden of his so-called destiny is when he returns to the Fire Nation from exile. He's got his honor back, his freedom, his place as a royal, his girlfriend, and most importantly, his father's respect. And yet, he was mighty conflicted. He had to see for himself, and when he got what he wanted, it just didn't feel right. He knew this Fire Nation was not the one he wanted to be a part of. He felt just as alone as when he roamed the Earth Kingdom alone. No Fire Nation, no mother, no Uncle Iroh. When Zuko writes the letter to Mai, the entire setting and preparation felt to me like someone writing a suicide letter. And maybe that was because Zuko had killed his old self to bring forth the real him. A truly hard decision. For Kovu, his wilderness period comes after he's exiled from the Pride Lands and can't return to the Outlanders as well. For both characters, even though they were not meaning to be in the state that they found themselves in, the invisible hands of destiny took them there, since a wilderness period is essential to the character development, where our heroes discover their true identity and destinies. Rewatching The Lion King 2 again made me realize how short the movie was. Just an hour and 20 minutes. I could barely believe it because it felt much longer as a child. And it made me realize just how much of the story was compressed into that time limit. So the character development of Kovu under the weight of his destiny is not as drawn out as Zuko. I mean, I could see a few things that help turn Kovu into his true self, but it could be much better if the story was a bit longer, you know? But Zuko is quite similar to Kovu, so perhaps a deeper look into his own struggle will shed more light on Kovu as well. And for me, the most important thing about their characters is their scars. The most meaningful scene that explains this for me is this scene. You can see the way Zuko looks at Song there, and you can tell that he could relate with her. Probably for the first time ever, he found someone outside what he thought was his home that was just like him. He realizes that more than being a prince of the Fire Nation, he was a victim of it. It's similar to Kovu, who also looks at the water and sees himself turn into Scar, someone he desperately didn't want to be. Both of them, princes and victims of a war they didn't choose, and they had scars to show for it. Scars given to them by parents and family who were supposed to love them. Zuko was able to relate with Song, and on his journeys in the Earth Kingdom, he came to feel empathy for a kid who lost his brother, a traveling man and his pregnant wife, and even Katara in the loss of her mother. He needed to go live with the enemy to know that he was just like them and find himself once again. Same thing with Kovu, and they found themselves somewhere in between being citizens of their people and citizens of the larger community of people or lions that struggle to find out who you are, what your morals are, what your purpose is, and what you're meant to achieve with your time here. That's relatable, isn't it? And that's because we are all Zuko and Kovu. We are all misfits who will find peace when we see ourselves in other people. If you enjoyed this, you can go on a binge on the Pangolo channel. Start with this video on the screen, and I'll see you there.